Right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. Our topic this afternoon is how one version single-handedly eliminated the upgrade story. Before we get started with the presentation this afternoon, just want to run through one or two housekeeping pieces. We are going to be having the questions towards the end of the session, so if you wouldn't mind just typing up your questions in the questions box, and we'll dedicate some time for those questions. Depending on how many questions we get in, we might just extend that 5 minutes to a couple of extra minutes, just so that you can have your questions answered. In the event of us not being able to get to all the questions or something very specific, our account managers will take those online, and then we will revert back to you as soon as we get the opportunity. Just to let everyone know, we are recording the session this afternoon. The session will be uploaded to the Professional Advantage YouTube channel, and you will be sent a link after the session. So this is quite an exciting time for us. As we all know, upgrades is a very, very challenging and demanding thing with any ERP investment that one gets involved in. This is a really big change for us, and we are very fortunate this afternoon to be joined by two of our senior team leaders within the Finance and Ops team, being Darren Croft and Nicholas Cram. Darren is our technical specialist, having been around the traps for quite a while. He brings 30 years of experience to the fore, quite actively involved in the Microsoft fold as well, together with Nicholas in terms of driving through all the changes that we do have. As a note as well, Nicholas is quite actively involved with Microsoft in some of their Yammer groups, and a really well-respected contributor to those. So I think without further ado, we have got quite a bit to get through this afternoon. Don't want to hold it up. I don't want to steal the thunder, and hopefully you guys enjoy what you see. So I'm going to hand over to Nicholas, and Nick will run through the agenda for this afternoon, and then we'll get straight into it.
Great. Thank you very much, Brian. So welcome everybody to this webinar. Today what we're going to be talking about is what is known as one version. So before we get to that, what we'll actually run through is a short history of Dynamics upgrades, and we're actually going to understand what we mean by the upgrade story before we actually get to what exactly the one version brings to the table. We'll then step through how you're going to be managing your environments in the new one version world, and especially have a focus on the testing side of things. Basically, we will need to be testing things that are going to be released on a regular cadence, and so there will be a whole segment of this particular webinar that will be dedicated to both manual and automated testing. We'll be running through some demonstrations of how that actually is run, and then we'll have a Q&A segment at the end of the show. So, a short history of upgrades in Dynamics. So, for those of you who don't know too much about what happened before Microsoft Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations appeared on the market, we have to run all the way back to 1986, where the first version of the ever-evolving Dynamics product was actually created by the Damgaard brothers in Denmark. So it's known as Concord Finance. And then in 1991, they actually created their Concord XL developer suite, which introduces a thing called overlaying, which is basically the ability to take a standard bit of code that is produced with the out-of-the-box product, be able to copy that code into a different layer, which sits above the original code, and that actually just allows you to modify the standard code without having to worry too much about losing any of that standard code. You can compare, you can do whatever you like, and you can actually see what you've actually done. So that was the beginning of the upgrade story. That was where we really were at a stage where we were able to do upgrades with some good tools. From 1994 to 2002, there were a number of mergers and acquisitions. The product evolved. Damgaard Data and IBM created a joint venture in 1994 and 1998. IBM Axapta was the rebranded version of Concord XL. And then in 2001, Navision actually acquired Damgaard Data, rebranded it to Navision. And then Microsoft actually acquired Navision in 2002. And from there, basically the Dynamics brand came into being around 2009. So from 2003 to 2015, there was a lot of functional enrichment and technical enrichment of the product to get it to a stage where it was actually an enterprise scale product. At that point, and in fact in 2013, 2014, Microsoft had already started working on the cloud product, and that project went live in 2016 and was soon rebranded Microsoft Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, which is part of the Business Apps, Microsoft Business Apps Suite. And that is the platform as a service that lives in Azure and is very much what I think Microsoft are now looking at as being very much the end game of the solution. We're now in a situation where we have basically got an application, do not have a lot of maintenance to do on the application, and furthermore they replaced the overlaying, which still required some degree of upgrade work, with the extensions-based development paradigm, which allows the code, the actual Microsoft standard code, to remain untouched. In April 2019, the one version of Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations was actually released. So what is one version? So it was announced as an initiative in 2018. All customers had to be on the same version of Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations, and all customers will receive monthly updates, continuous updates. So what this means is that with everybody on the same version, this obviously has two main benefits. One is that obviously you always have the latest and greatest version available. Secondly, in terms of support, it simplifies a lot of things because everybody is on the same version. Microsoft is able to support much more easily than having a broad band of versions to support. So the stability of the product will improve over time. So previous to one version, so just stepping back to what I was saying previously, the old upgrade story, basically new releases were major versions. So every time, every step up from AXAPTA 3 through to AX 2009, I know some of you may be on 2009, and then through AX 2012 and up to D365, each new release was a major version. And that obviously, with the modifications as overlaying, would change to the Microsoft code. So in the past, those upgrades were quite expensive. The modifications involved those changes to the standard code, which is the overlaying. In an upgrade, these modifications had to be merged with the new version of the Microsoft code. Whether it was a major update or even a service pack update, there was always a large amount of work to do. And in addition, there was usually a complex data upgrade process that was required. And both of these tasks took a substantial amount of time, which led to large, expensive, risky projects that obviously stopped customers from being on the latest version. So what has changed with one version? New releases are now monthly updates. They are minor versions. They are not major versions. So from version 8.1, the minimum, which is the minimum required version for the continuous updates, we call it, all development is done by extension. This means that modifications only add to existing logic and do not replace it. No standard Microsoft logic is changed, which allows Microsoft to provide updates without causing conflicts and modifications. And furthermore, as updates are provided monthly, there are very few data structure changes that are required. Each change is simpler and requires a simple in-place data update script actually supplied as part of the monthly update. So there is no additional action really to be done in terms of that. What it leads to is obviously small updates at a faster rate, better cadence, lower impact to business. So it means that you can actually stay on the latest version, and that all of that risk, cost, and the huge timelines of any major upgrades has been removed. That has been the target of Microsoft for some time now. Ever since they moved to the cloud, we have been aware that they want to be moving to that paradigm. But obviously, getting onto it requires a lot of extra tooling, extra management tools to be available. So that's obviously taken a little bit of time to get those into place and get those out and ready. So once you've actually got your environment onto the version 8.1 or above, you are now eligible for the continuous updates. So after this, Microsoft will automatically apply updates to your UAT and production environments. And you'll need to actually specify when you like the updates to be applied, and that will be through the Lifecycle Services portal. Now, just on that, we will come back to what exactly the Lifecycle Services portal is. Basically, it's the maintenance portal for the product and also for the implementation project, I beg your pardon. Microsoft will be applying the updates based on your calendar, based on the customer's calendar. So it will be first applied to the UAT testing environment. And at that point, you'll need to perform regression tests on it to ensure that obviously your critical business processes are not affected. And like I said, we will talk about that in more detail. At that point, if there is an issue detected, you are able to opt out of a monthly update if a blocking issue is detected. And you're allowed to opt out 2 times, by which time Microsoft will have found, obviously, a solution, or there will be some sort of workaround. They obviously won't force a customer to take an update if it is going to cause a block to the business. Basically, that gives a 3-month period in which that issue can be resolved. Further to that, we also note that Microsoft will give a 12-month notice of any potential breaking changes. So what are breaking changes? Is basically if you have a change to some part of the product that needs to be carefully managed, maybe a deeper change, and maybe there are modifications that have been done by a customer that relate to that change. In that case, Microsoft will actually identify that as a breaking change and give a big heads up 12 months previous to that. Furthermore, any new functionality that appears in the product will be disabled by default until you are ready to enable it, and it will enable itself automatically after that 12 months. So that's both the breaking changes and also the new features. And so they've actually produced, Microsoft has actually created a new feature management workspace. So this is new in the latest version of Dynamics. And what this actually allows an IT administrator to do is actually to go in and say, what are the features that I actually need to be released to my staff today? Which ones do I really want to use right now? Expense reports reimagined. Maybe I'm going to go through a period of tests in a test environment, and then I'll release that to all users. So I can then enable or disable any of those features. And so I'm not finding new functionality that appears after a monthly update. Users are obviously going to come and ask me about and decide on the new functionality. Once you've actually completed all of the testing, that update is actually applied to the production environment. First of all, the update calendar, I do beg your pardon. First of all, this is a screenshot from the Lifecycle Services portal. And here we can actually see where the cadence is going to be set up. So this is the update cadence. So I'm going to be, in this case, it's every month I'm going to have the second Saturday of the month, and the time slots from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. Hong Kong time in that particular instance. If I want to, I can pause an update. So I've detected an issue, I can actually pause an update from that portal. And then if I want to, I can actually see the update calendar for the next 12 months. So that is the next slide. We actually see a set of updates that are actually scheduled. And we can see the expected dates for those minor releases to become available of those updates. And you can actually go in and manage those directly within the Lifecycle Services portal. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Darren, and he's actually going to walk us through the Lifecycle Services portal so you have a better idea of what exactly that's. So Darren, if you'd like to pull your screen up.
Thanks, Nick. What we're looking at here is the Microsoft Lifecycle Services portal. As Nick explained, this is the central place we go to manage all D365 projects. When we look here, you basically see there's a section on the methodology. So this goes through the different stages of the implementation project, from our develop, test, deploy, operate, etc. And at each stage we have a number of tasks. So this basically helps guide you through the implementation project. Scrolling across to the right, we then have a list of environments. Now this is just an internal demo environment, so we only have one environment here. But in a real world scenario, you'll actually have your production environment, your UAT environment, build environments, whatever. You also have some tiles over the side here, which will either appear here as tiles or may appear under your drop-down menu here, depending on the particular version of Lifecycle Services. What these do is give you a number of tools that you can use within Lifecycle Services. I'm not going to go through all of these now. I'll just mention a few of them that are sort of relevant to this discussion. Cloud-hosted environments. As mentioned, we've got environments listed here which are part of your subscription. You can also deploy additional environments to your own Azure subscription, and these are typically things like development environments, additional test environments, etc. When we're talking about the automatic updates that applied, Microsoft will apply those to your UAT environment first and then your production environment. Any other environments you have, so development environments, etc., you actually need to manage those updates yourself at a suitable time. So normally we would look at updating your dev environments after your production environment's been updated. In order to manage what gets updated and when, you've actually got your asset library over here. I'm just going to pop into that for a little bit. And what you see in your asset library is a whole lot of different asset types. So the assets are pretty much anything that relates to your project. And really the one we're interested in today is software deployable packages. So at the moment, we've only got one update here, but this is where any updates that have been applied to your environment will sit in there. You can also import updates from the Microsoft shared library as well. That will show you all of the upcoming updates that are available. Just go back to the main screen. Okay, some of the other things, project users, this is where you actually manage the users that have access to the LCS project and what permissions they have. So you can have anything from a team member who can pretty much come in here and access the environments, log into the environments, work with business processes, etc. Environment managers that can actually start and stop environments, create new environments, etc. And then obviously project owners who have full control over the LCS project. When we look at an environment itself, if I actually just pop in there, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but within an environment, you've got some options down here for actually performing environment monitoring. So if you're having issues with performance or anything like that, you actually use the LCS portal to monitor that environment, see what's going on, see what might be causing delays, etc., and also look at some diagnostic information as well. Okay, so that's just a brief overview of the LCS portal. Pass back to Nicholas now.
Thank you, Darren. As I was saying, this update calendar also finds itself within the Lifecycle Services, the LCS portal, as it is known. When you've actually got an update that's about to be applied, so it will be applied to your sandbox first. So you can see you update the sandbox, and then a week later it will be updated in the production environment. At that point, you should be running regression testing. So question, do I need to perform tests monthly? Do we need to repeat, in fact, a full user acceptance testing suite every single month? So the answer to that is yes and no. Basically, safe as Microsoft tries to make updates, there are always risks with an update. So it's important that you do test enough to be comfortable that the update hasn't affected any business critical processes, any key processes in your organization. When the updates actually come out, they're also accompanied by a list of the hot fixes that are part of that upgrade, and those hot fixes may include both features and simple fixes to functionality that might be effective. And so it also gives you a good idea of where those changes have been, and you compare that with what you know as your key processes, and you can immediately see that, for instance, the project module has been heavily updated, but you don't use the project module. You can already disregard, a large chunk of that is what needs to be tested. So what's important is to actually work out what exactly you should be testing. And so how do I actually organize that testing? The first thing is to actually identify that full list of tests. And you'd be wanting to do that with the help of the business process library, which LCS. So here is an example of a BPM. And here I have basically a structure. It holds all the processes that I might actually be running in my company. And one of them might be, for instance, creating sales orders. And then what I can do is I can actually, if I just go back to the overview tab, I can actually record a test within D365. So it's really just I click a button, I run through the test, I can then upload that test, and that actually creates a test case here with all of the steps that I actually ran. So it records all of those steps, and I'll talk a little bit more about exactly how do I organize testing. So as you see, we've got a place where we can actually set up all of the tests, actually make a note of every single test that I'm wanting to be doing, every single scenario that I want to be running. And then from there, I'll be creating either automated or manual tests. How is Microsoft helping you with this? What tools are available? I'm going to hand back to Darren, and he's going to talk very quickly about what tools are actually available to help you with this testing. Because obviously, with this big change to the way things are being updated, there needs to be this extra tooling. So Darren, if you'd like to talk about some testing.
Sure. So look, I suppose there's a couple of sides to testing. As customers, you're really interested in your user level testing. As partners or ISVs, we obviously need to make sure that any modifications that we have don't get broken by any of the monthly updates. So there's a couple of different levels of testing that we do. From a development point of view, and come in and show you. So this is a tool called DevOps, which Nick will probably mention a little bit later as well. So DevOps is used throughout all D365 projects, and it handles everything from development activities, source control, also things like issue tracking. So if you've got issues with the system, you can actually log an issue in here, and that gets tracked through, and you can use it for collaboration, etc. Whenever you're doing development, you create what's called a build, and the build is what ultimately gets deployed to the environment. What you can do on a build is set up tests from a development point of view, and you can see here an example. I've got this build set up that's running a number of tests. So when we're creating a build that's going to be deployed, we can straight away see whether all the tests have worked or whether there's something failing. And if something fails, we get details about what fails, etc. So this is a test that, from a partner point of view, or an ISV or developer's point of view, we can use to help identify issues before we even get to deploying the modifications. Once modifications have been deployed and you're running along quite happily, and then you actually get your monthly updates start to come in, obviously you need to be able to test in your UAT environment, and that's where the regression suite tool comes in. So I'm going to hand back to Nick now to talk about regression testing.
Regression suite automation tool, RSAT. Now this is a tool that Microsoft have brought out in the last 6 months, and it's a tool that allows the business unit to create and automate test cases. The high-level steps to actually use this tool is basically the task recordings that I spoke about earlier, click-through of the dynamic screen. You're going to record that, and those will be uploaded to the business process library, as I was showing earlier, and that's all automatically synced into as your DevOps that Darren was actually showing. So what is then done is you organize those into a set of test cases. Those test cases are then used to actually run these tests, and those are actually interactive tests. So what you're actually doing is you're actually testing the user interface. You're not just testing that the code works. You're actually testing that from a user experience viewpoint, these things are still working. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to do a quick demonstration. I'm also going to demonstrate how you can build manual test cases, because obviously building all these automated tests is all well and fine, but in some cases you may have a new process that you've just brought in. You don't have a test case at this point that is automated. You want to just create a manual test case and just run that manually to ensure that actually is working after the updates. So I'm going to first look at the manual test. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go to a test case that I created earlier. So this one is to put customers on hold for all transactions. It's a very simple test. Basically what it is opening up, going to the customer's form, selecting customer, opening it up, and then changing a value on one of the hold status is going to be updated. So all I've done here is I've gone into Azure DevOps, and you can see we have basically this is a work item that I've created, and that work item is actually linked back to the BPM. So I've actually put that in test case, so I keep things organized. And what I can do is I can also not only put the action, what the expected result is, but I can also put in attachments, which will be screenshots or information that I might need to actually finish the test. So by adding in all of these images what I can then do is when I'm actually running the test, so what I do is I go to my test plans. This is where all of the testing is actually held together and organized. So this particular test, I've put it into a customer management folder. These folders are what known as test suites. So you can create a hierarchy of folders, basically to have a sequence of tests that follow on one after the other correctly. So when I'm actually doing my manual test, what I'll do is I'll just go into DevOps and I'll just hit Run for Web Application. That will bring up a little pop-up that will show me all of the steps, and it will show me any screenshots that I may need to see or whatever I might need. And then I'm just going to run through this test manual. So I'll go into D365. I'll open up the all customers in this particular legal entity. Yep, that works fine. Select the Birch Company customer account. Yes, that works fine. Open the customer details form, click edit, and then navigate to this fast tab and select that. And then maybe there has been a new feature added at this point that actually is no longer, this is no longer the way to do it. Maybe they've now added a separate form to manage that. So maybe in this case, I've now got a separate form for managing statuses detected. Okay, and then once that's all done and I finish my test, I'm going to hit save and close, and that will show the outcome of that particular test. And then actually, if I look at the runs that I've actually had, and I can go there from whatever, but I can see that I have, in this case, I have my test which actually needs investigation. If I actually click into that, I'll see the summary that the outcome is failed, and I'll be able to actually go through and see the test results and actually go back and understand exactly what went on. So that's just manual testing. That's very simple manual testing. Once you've got a number of tests set up with your test plans that you've actually gone through, you've done your recordings, what Microsoft has brought out is the capability of actually, once you've done all that, click through, I'm going to click on my customer, I'm going to click on that particular tab, I'm going to fill in a value here, I'm going to close all of those forms down. Once you actually record that, and you've actually uploaded this, what it will actually generate, it will actually automatically generate a test, okay? And so when that has been done, you can then connect it into the RSAT Regression Suite Automation tool. And so this is one that I created earlier, which is creating an Australia customer. So this particular test is a very simple one. What I could have done is created a number of tests and have them succeeding one after the other and having some information from my first test passing into my second test. So I've created a customer. I then want to create a sales order, and I want to then release that sales order to the warehouse. I want to then maybe fulfill that particular sales order. Then I want to maybe deliver a note, post, and invoice that particular customer. So I can set all those tests up end to end. And so and then right the way through into AR, the payments, and all the rest of it. And I can actually create a sequence of tests and actually sequence and having those information feed into one another. I've just got a simple test for the sake of time. So what I'm going to do is I'll actually show you what this looks like. I'm going to run this, and what you'll actually see is this is actually going to start up a script. It's actually going to pull in a parameters file, and I'll talk about this later. We can actually create multiple parameter files and then have the same test being run with different parameters, so maybe a different customer, different items, different company, whatever it is. So you see it's now starting up the browser. So what you can see is Chrome is being controlled by automated test software. So this is now initializing D365. It's actually running it, it's putting it into the correct company. And now it's going to move me into the customer form. So you can see these are all of the steps that I have recorded. These are now being automatically run by the system. And it's basically looking at that Excel file, which has the parameters in it, and saying, what do I need to do now? Customer account. What's the customer account number? In this case, I've got it to generate a random number for the customer account, just so that I'm not creating the same customer twice. Okay? It's created the customer. It's finished. Everything's good. It closes down. It goes back to the Regression Suite Automation tool. And at that point, it sees the result is passed. Not only that, there was a little flicker at the bottom here which shows that it's also uploaded that test result into Azure DevOps. So if I just now click on Open and I run into, I move into the case, I can actually see this is the test case that I actually run. So that allows me to actually see the test case. And then if I go back to the test plan, or in fact the runs, I can actually see what the latest runs were. And so I can see that this one has run perfectly okay, and I can actually see, and if anything happens in any of these runs, it will be brought up here. We will see that immediately here. Okay, so that's a very very brief overview of the tool that is there. Obviously, you will build those automated tests up over time. At the start, I mean, for a customer who's only just transitioned onto the latest version, obviously the test library, as it were, will not be maybe as complete as it would be later on. So you will still obviously need, in some cases, to resort to manual testing. But now we do now have a full set of testing, and that includes also the ability to test the warehousing app. For those that know it, there is also a new testing function, testing feature that allows you to actually test that as well. Okay, so that's that demonstration. Now, what are the limitations of automated testing? There are just a few. The first of all is that you need to manage a known state of data or create data during the test. So you saw in my case, I actually had a customer number that was generated, so that's fine, but then I was using a particular customer group, so I have to know some of that data before the test. What's important to know is that once the data is created during testing, it's not rolled back. So if I've created a customer, a sales order, and invoicing it, then in that UAT environment, those things do not get rolled back. So if I want to redo the test, I would be doing it on another sales order. I wouldn't obviously have the same sales order number. I wouldn't be using the same customer number if I'm creating a new customer. So you've got a couple of ways of managing that. You can either have a backup of your testing environment, or you can maybe refresh it from the live environment and run the tests directly on that. Manual testing may still be required in the following cases. With integrations, there is some level of server automation that can be achieved with either the asset tool or through tools that are available, such as Postman. There are file-based interfaces that may be tested using the data task automation function, which is another testing tool that we haven't unfortunately got time to demonstrate today. And then, although we may have tested from a D365, from a Dynamics 365 viewpoint, obviously you will need to go and validate the other end, whatever third-party application you're actually integrating into. You have to go and check up on that. The other two things where you will need manual testing is reporting. You may be able to produce a report, but if it's a paper copy, obviously you cannot validate that through the automated testing. You need to do that manually. And the same for emailing. Once you actually produce an email, that's fine, but you then have to be sure that it arrives at destination at the test account. That, once again, is something you need to do manually. The thing I wanted to show, so we saw with the tool in action, we talked about the parameters file and the data. So I can actually just open that file up, and I can actually see within this file what is the data that I've actually been using to actually do this test. So in this case, I've got recording name, I've got the company, so I can change that. I can have a test user that is different to an admin user. So I was an admin user, but if I wanted to put a user in with a specific role, I can put that test user in, and that will then validate not only that the test is running correctly, but also that it's running correctly for the users and that they have sufficient roles to actually run those tests. I can add in pauses as well between each test case. I also have the ability to trap a variable, so that's what I was talking about. I can grab that account number, use it on a sales order in a subsequent test. Most important here, we've got the data that I've actually been plugging into the system is actually just a set of boxes. So all of this is generated automatically when I actually did the recording, and then I can come in and change it. One of the things I actually did is I actually used an Excel formula to say, I actually want that to be a random number. I don't want it to be just something that, whatever. I am actually, every time I do the test, it will create a new customer code. So that's basically it for the RSAT tool. That's to go into, and will be available to actually go into that. There are some useful links that we will send out with the follow-up email. There is the service updates overview, FAQ, so you'll be able to look at those and then give a little bit more information about the testing and one version in general. So I think we'll wrap up here.
Nick and Darren, just really thank you very much for walking us through the process and for us to get a better understanding of what's involved with one version. Really, timing is almost perfect. We're at 5 minutes for questions. A couple of questions have come through, and you may have addressed them during your presentation, but I think just to point them out, and we can address them one by one. First question is how can I test and validate that integrations continue to work?
Okay, so that's pretty much what I was saying. From a D365 viewpoint, we have the ability to test the integrations. We also have some other testing tools. Not only is there the RSAT tool, the automation, there is the data task automation tool that we didn't have time to present today, that allows you to actually run the push files into a folder so that they get uptaken by a bash job. But like I said, the important thing is that you're validating on one side. What the automation tests that are actually given by Microsoft won't test is obviously the other side of the integration, so the third party. So you would need to obviously have some way of validating that, probably manually.
Right, perfect. One of the other questions is, how can I determine what has changed in the service update?
Okay, that's a great question. We've got, obviously, with each update, we have a list of hotfixes. So that gives you a good indication. We also are going to receive a report from Microsoft. There is a new report that is going to be made available that allows you to actually compare what you use against what has been released. So it will actually point out what are the hotspots. Where has Microsoft done a lot of changes or any changes where you use the application, and maybe where either you use the application intensively in, say, the sales module, and they've got some hotfixes that are coming to the sales module, or if you have maybe the production module running, you don't use it a lot because you're not a major production company, but Microsoft has done a lot of work around that. Once again, that will create a hotspot around there. So this extra tool will help you actually identify those areas.
Right, perfect. And then I think we've just got time for one final question before we do the wrap. Are batch jobs suspended during the service update?
Yes, while the updates are actually happening, the system's essentially offline, so there won't be any batch jobs running, there won't be any users using the system or anything. So that's why it's important to actually pick your update window appropriately. It's a time essentially where you don't want users using the system. Batch jobs are going to be suspended, etc. But then they'll all be started up automatically again once the update is finished.
Right, no, excellent. I think that's about it, guys. I think we just go to just the last contact details there. We just really want to thank everyone on behalf of Professional Advantage for attending today. We do have some contact details up on the screen for Michael. Michael looks after our account management team, and if you could reach out to him if you have any questions, and he'll ensure that the appropriate account manager does follow up or does reach out to you, or, again, I'm sure you have a really strong relationship with our team. Just approach them directly, and we'll make sure that any questions that are put to us are answered. Once again, really thank you very much for your time, and thanks very much to Nicholas Cram and Darren Croft for doing such an outstanding job this morning. Thank you.